Hey guys, I'm Kuya. I run Poly Convenience Store. It's a brand based on a fictional convenience store set in a dystopian future. Today we're going to be looking at Program 18, Energy for a Brighter Future. The initial idea actually came from a movie called Dallas Buyers Club with Matthew McConaughey and Jared Leto. And in the movie, Matthew McConaughey's character gets AIDS and goes to Japan to this laboratory to try and get medication. The name of that lab was called Kobayashi Lab. And my alias, Kuya, in longer form is Kuyashi, and that's what I went by for a very long time. And so when I saw Kobayashi Labs, it kind of clicked in my head. Whenever I hear things that I really like or has a ring to it, I always tend to write it down in my notebook as inspiration for future phrases or just anything I could possibly use them for. And so Kobayashi Labs was one thing I had written down, and which I would reference in the future to create Kuyashi Chemical Labs. So if I recall correctly, I always wanted to do a kind of futuristic laboratory theme to drop. And my initial thing that I had to come up with was how I could incorporate that into the convenience store story. And I finally realized one day, I thought, oh, it could be a secret laboratory under the convenience store. I had come across the intro to Pain Kit, which is this old PlayStation game in 1999, and I really liked the industrial feel that it had to it, as well as the transition at the very beginning, and how it pans down into this huge laboratory where you just see this production line. And I thought it just fit really well as just an overall transition and idea, and incorporating it into the idea that under the convenience store is this huge cog machine thing, pressing and creating clothes. Now for inspo on the actual character itself. For these animations, the central idea for the convenience store is the main character, or the guy working there, is actually me. And that's why if you look at each collection and then the photos after, they kind of resemble each other. And there's a lot of parallels between the fictional world as well as real life. The chemical lab being something like my room, and then the worker underneath. Here's one screenshot I took. When you view it on Discord or wherever that's from, it's super small. So to me, when I had seen it originally, it looked like a scientist working on something, just kind of bending down. It's funny how I interpret things based on what I am working on at that time. So to me, I saw a mad scientist. Another cool detail with the character involved referencing real life eyewear. I had bought I think just two different types of eyewear and kind of combined them. And here are some test shots for that. This is my brother. I really wanted it to make it look wacky, and by just sticking this straight out and make it look just really crazy shaped. The main references I got for that glasses eyewear was primarily from Blade Runner. I'm really big on making clothes and accessories to modify the human form and body so that it looks very just different and exotic almost. And so by doing these types of headgear and eyewear and stuff, it really creates this interesting look, right? Because the eyes is the most human thing. And so when you kind of make them beady and then add all this extra stuff, it's it's different. Now here's actually where I sourced a lot of just general aesthetic and real life application inspiration. And this is the most direct right here, probably. The fastening system on the crew neck on near the waist. I saw stuff like this and I thought that was really neat, as well as this right here. And just seeing how you can kind of adjust the waist as you wanted, so you could have loose or you can tighten it a little bit. And it gives this kind of utilitarian and kind of literal, almost workwear feel, right? Because we hear a lot about workwear, but I kind of really wanted to hone in on that in some aspect, to the point where I almost actually sourced this fire resistant material. And I had wanted to do that, or at the very minimum copy the fabric like blocking look here with like a two separate fabrics as well as on the sleeve. But I ended up not doing that and just opting for a more simple, just one fabric all throughout. Here's some more inspo for the Chemical Lab windbreaker, and you can also see like just in general the color scheme of teal, white, and black. And I really like this industrial feel right here. And I remember seeing this image and just thinking like, there's just something so clean about that, you know. It's just super basic, but something beautiful about that. I actually almost did do a tape similar to this as well, but I think I tried it and it looked too much like a straight up hazmat suit, and it would have looked too jarring to wear in public. So I just made it a little bit more simple and changed the threading to be a contrast blue thread. I also took inspo on how they blocked the hoodie here by having this strip, and you can kind of see that on the windbreaker. Here is big inspo for placement of the graphic. Just something really big on the back to, you know, represent like this company or this laboratory you work for. It's almost like a translation from shoe to windbreaker. I liked the translucency that they had for this, and it really made it feel like a prototype with the print, right? This blue kind of print, it says model and size, and the mesh is translucent. And that's why for the windbreaker, the fabric itself is kind of very, very faintly translucent as well. And I actually wanted to put the print in between the two fabrics because the lining is polyester and then the shell is nylon. And so my plan was to print it on the back side of the nylon so that when you wore it, or when they sewed it together and you wore it, it would be like inside, and it would kind of give it this like milky finish, right? Because it's on, you're seeing through it on the fabric rather than just them printing directly on it. If I ever go back and remake it, I will probably do it the way I had intended. The sweater has just a really simple like webbing, black webbing on the side, and that's probably a kind of a reference with how they incorporated the black and to make it tactical feeling. It's funny because I actually told the manufacturers to do it, and I was like, have you guys added webbing to a sweater before? And they were like, not really. So I kind of had to explain to them exactly what I wanted, and they're like, they showed me a picture and they're like this, and I was like, yes, that's perfect. Now for the accessories, I really wanted to create something that would be authentic to the whole Chemical Lab theme. For the Chemical Lab bag, my main goal was to create something that looked like a engineer, laboratory scientist's kind of everyday bag that they would bring into work or the lab. I was at an event and they were wearing the Chemical Lab bag, and they had asked me what the purpose of this clip was. And my intention for that was when you were holding the bag on your shoulder, it would be within placement already, so that when you walked up to a door or anywhere you need to get access into, you would have your key or whatever fob attached to that little clip, and you can just place it in without having to take off your bag or having to shuffle around too much. It's just an easy, quick access. Growing up, my dad worked at this place that produced chips and microchips and stuff for computers, and he would wear this bunny suit. And I remember specifically he brought us there, and to get in he had this retractable lanyard and his badge, and to get access into the actual factory he had to put his lanyard up to the reader to be let in. And it's just interesting to me how that memory stuck in my head up until this point to implement that into this little detail. For the nuclear spring hook, it's just a really unique and different design than your average carabiner, and that's also why I didn't want to call it the carabiner. Etched into the spring hook is these 4 symbols, and they're actually on the rest of the garments of this drop as well, and these are the elements for nuclear. There's also these symbols which look like nuclear symbols, but it's actually the symbol for shelter. And that was a whole play on the idea that the convenience store is set in this dystopian futuristic world where obviously nuclear is imminent and used in this kind of war and what creates this dystopia. Now, something kind of crazy about this symbol is when I first started using it, I used it on this rug that I had designed. And mind you, this was before COVID. This was February 2020. And before we even had quarantine because of COVID. When I designed this piece, as you can see there's the symbol for shelter. And, like I said, because it's a play on this dystopian world with nuclear, the concept of the store was that each item that I made was quarantined from any nuclear contaminants. And that was also an explanation as to why I had previously wrapped and packaged each garment into this plastic, and I vacuum sealed it at the time. And here it says the text, "Please ensure you are quarantined from any potential contaminants before entering the store." And that's the welcome rug that I made. And it's just crazy that I had any mention of quarantine before, like right before the for real quarantine happened for us. Before I had a solid idea of what the final animation would actually consist of, I compiled a bunch of clips from this really obscure nuclear laboratory testing program, and I cut it up to kind of align it with this synth, and again just taking from the overall industrial feel. I also really liked how the color scheme was red, and this shot right here where it shows just this long hallway gave me a good idea for how large I really wanted to make the underground laboratory to be, like almost echoey and just like really spatial. And it would go on to help emphasize the idea that there's just one person in there, and to give this a really roomy and empty vibe with just a bunch of echoes and reverb. So at this point all I had was the logo that I commissioned from this guy named Hunter, and I told him, hey, I want to have this where it says Kuyashi Chemical Lab with the text below and then 4 circles below as well. And I think in like 2 weeks he came in clutch and gave it to me, and I think it was just perfect right off the bat. It was exactly what I had been looking for. This audio was actually a sample as well from a documentary from this composer named Ryuichi Sakamoto, and he plays the synth at a certain part of the documentary. As soon as I heard it, I instantly knew, like, wait, this really fits a vibe, and so I had recorded it on my iPhone, not even sure what I would use it for. And then when this whole idea kind of came together, I refound it and I was like, yes, this perfectly fits the vibe I was going for. And for the final animation, I had the audio snippet reproduced and sampled. I'm actually going to be doing a reissue of this chemical lab bag very soon. I already have some ideas that I want to implement. I want to directly address any flaws that the first version might have, and so I'm probably going to be crowdsourcing some feedback and just seeing what they liked and didn't like about the lab bag. Going into the second one, I want it to be grayscale. I want it to be heavyweight cotton canvas, and I want it to be this really worn-in, vintage feeling piece that you can really just toss around and really feel the textures and the way that it all comes together with the construction. There's this really unique experience that I had when I was in my garage trying to find some tools, and I was shuffling in this bag, and then I stopped and I was like, wait a minute, the construction and the fabric of this bag is really nice. And I was just looking at it for like a minute or so, just kind of feeling it and really appreciating how it felt, how it sounded with the fabrics against each other. And I really want to recreate that experience for people when they have the reissue of the chemical lab bag, and just feeling this really worn in, greatly constructed piece. And I hope that that will be experienced each time that someone interacts with the reissue of the second piece. Here's a really early sample prototype of the nuclear spring hook in black. I may, now looking at it, release this in black after I release the grayscale black reissue of the chemical lab bag. But let me know what you guys think if I release the black version. Overall, I'm really happy with how this drop had turned out, not just reception and monetary wise, but from a personal artistic value as well. A big challenge in having any type of idea is the execution part of it. It's always extremely frustrating as an artist or creator to have your idea not be exactly met on the same level when executing it. And that, I think, is one of the root problems for why a lot of artists are so critical of themselves. When they show their art to someone, they're like, oh, this is really impressive, and they're impressed by it. Yet the artist looks at it and still sees its flaws. And I think it's just because the artist has built an entire image of it in their head, and for however great it is physically, it was even greater in their mind. The clothing, I did see some flaws in it. However, I'm overall happy with how it turned out, just because I can't have everything perfect all the time.